the greatest day in the history of Queen, Jimi's electrified anthem, the Talking Heads going for broke. Sometimes all it takes is one great show to take an act from famous to legendary. In 2004, late Beatle George Harrison was posthumously inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. At the ceremony, a few of his buddies gathered on stage to play some of his songs. The band featured legends like Tom Petty, Electric Light Orchestra's Jeff Lynne, and Steve Winwood alongside Harrison's son Danny. And while everyone watching was surely excited when they broke into the Beatles' opus While My Guitar Gently Weeps, no one could have known they were about to witness history in the making. When it came time for the first guitar solo, Lynne's guitarist Mark Mann stepped up and played the same solo Eric Clapton played on the studio recording note for note. Then, something magical happened. None other than Prince was waiting backstage. After the song's final refrain, he appeared on stage, almost out of nowhere, and laid down what many consider one of the greatest guitar solos ever performed as everyone else on stage watched in awe. To cap the several-minute solo off, Prince just chucked his guitar up in the air at the end of the tune and sauntered off stage. And while we might not know where the guitar wound up, we do know that Prince left his name in the history books that night.
It was a show for us, it wasn't for them.
The show's producer, Joel Gallen, told the New York Times, "I still feel like people don't realize what an amazing guitar player he was. As a rock guitar player, he can go toe-to-toe with anybody." In 1994, Snoop Dogg was the hottest rapper on the planet. Following his contributions to Dr. Dre's first solo album, The Chronic, his own debut album, Doggy Style, was an instant smash. The 1993 LP produced 2 top 10 singles and shattered sales records for a solo debut. So his performance at the 1994 VMAs should have been a celebration if it weren't for a pesky criminal charge. Immediately following the previous year's VMAs, Snoop had been arrested on a murder charge related to a fatal run-in he had with neighborhood gangsters. At the time, Snoop had been driving a car while his passenger and bodyguard, McKinley Malik Lee, shot and killed a man. Both Snoop and Lee claimed the shooting was in self-defense, and the following year, Snoop brought his case to the VMAs as he awaited trial. He opted to perform Murder Was the Case and came to the stage in a wheelchair, surrounded by a full funeral scene complete with a casket, gospel choir, and mourners. Midway through the second verse, he got to his feet, sending the crowd into a frenzy. Then at the very end of the tune, the beat dropped out and Snoop loudly proclaimed his innocence to thunderous applause. Even better, his jury agreed. Snoop was acquitted of the charge in February 1996. 1985's Live Aid had one of the craziest lineups of any rock concert in history, with the likes of David Bowie, Elton John, The Who, and a reunited Led Zeppelin performing. The funny thing is, most people probably don't remember that some of those artists even played it, and that's because a little quartet called Queen totally stole the show. The concert took place simultaneously in Philadelphia and Wembley Stadium in London, and it was at Wembley that Queen played to 72,000 screaming fans. In their brief 22-minute set, Queen, and lead vocalist Freddie Mercury in particular, had the audience in the palm of their hand and proceeded to make everyone else on the bill look like amateurs by comparison.
Bob said, "Play the hits, it's a global jukebox. Don't get clever."
The crowd erupted into utter delirium when Mercury started pounding out the opening piano line to Bohemian Rhapsody, and everyone clapped along in unison to the chorus of the hit single Radio Gaga. When Mercury led his audience in an impromptu sing-along, scores of people chanted back like they were born to do it. By the time they played We Will Rock You, the band had proven without a doubt their ability to do just that. And surely even the other bands playing would have agreed that We Are the Champions could not have been a more fitting closer. It's hard to imagine David Bowie feeling insecure, but even he probably felt queasy having to follow that set. Speaking about the experience to Rolling Stone, guitarist Brian May didn't mince words, saying, "It was the greatest day of our lives."
What do you think the day's been like? It's nearly finished now.
I'm amazed, actually. I think it's really better than anyone could have hoped for.
When grunge legends Nirvana were slated to perform on MTV Unplugged, no one really knew what to expect. They were one of the loudest bands around at the time, so it was hard to predict what an acoustic set might look or sound like. What they got was a mesmerizing, beautifully constructed hour of music. As Rolling Stone's David Brown pointed out, the setlist wound up being notably light on the band's big hits, and featured very few songs off the recently released In Utero in particular. Instead, Nirvana played some deeper cuts that felt perfect for the setting. It was a masterful set that many consider the best MTV Unplugged had to offer. And while tracks like On a Plane, Something in the Way, and Pennyroyal Tea weren't as well loved as some of Nirvana's bigger singles at the time, the renditions they played that night helped cement them as the classics they are today. Come As You Are was really the only bona fide hit they played, and even that lent itself beautifully to a stripped-down arrangement. Additionally, the covers they played by the likes of David Bowie and Lead Belly really demonstrated how sophisticated they were behind their noisy, abrasive exterior. And the whole thing was tied together by Cobain's self-deprecating quips between songs.
Okay, but here's another one I could screw up.
Sadly, the show's legend only grew after Cobain's death. Nirvana's Unplugged CD came out just months after Cobain's passing and debuted at number 1. It would remain on the charts for a staggering 100 weeks and live on as a pivotal piece of Nirvana's brief history. Anyone even vaguely familiar with Sinead O'Connor was probably ready for her to ruffle some feathers when she played on Saturday Night Live in 1992. And while she certainly lived up to her reputation, watching her take aim at one of the most powerful institutions in the world probably wasn't on everyone's bingo card. During her second set, she performed a stirring a cappella rendition of Bob Marley's War. She looked directly into the camera, growing visibly more tense throughout the performance. As the song closed, she pulled out a picture of Pope John Paul II and ripped it to shreds. She then tossed the fragments into the audience and gave a battle cry.
Fight the real enemy!
The backlash was swift and intense, and conservative politicians, media outlets, and even fellow musicians quickly turned against her. But within a decade or so, the Roman Catholic Church's long history of child abuse finally became public knowledge, and more people saw where O'Connor was coming from the whole time. The incident forever changed her career trajectory, but she never regretted it. In 2021, she told the New York Times, "I'm not sorry I did it. It was brilliant." By the early 80s, Michael Jackson was no stranger to superstardom. Thanks to his 4 number-1 hits with the Jackson 5 and a slew of other top 40 singles throughout the 60s and early 70s, he was already a household name well before his biggest solo albums came out. Of course, his solo work was already well on the way to legend status by that point, and he had several top 20 albums under his belt, including 1979's Off the Wall. By May 1983, his album Thriller was right in the middle of its ridiculous 37-week run at number 1 on the Billboard chart. And even after that accomplishment, Jackson's career was still on the rise. On May 16th, Jackson performed on the Motown 25 Yesterday, Today, Forever TV special celebrating the iconic label's anniversary. Since the show was something of a walk down memory lane, producer Don Mischer told HuffPost that everyone who played at the celebration was forbidden from performing new material. And while legends like Marvin Gaye and Diana Ross obliged, Jackson was insistent on performing the recently released Billie Jean. Mischer wasn't into the idea at first, but seeing the superstar rehearse the tune instantly changed his mind. It was during that bombastic performance that Jackson publicly moonwalked for the first time, and it soon became his signature move. To this day, Thriller is the biggest album of all time, and you could argue that that night played a major role in cementing its legacy. The 1969 Woodstock Festival is often hailed as the gold standard for what live music should be, and it has that reputation for good reason. It might be the only point in history that such a high volume of iconic talent assembled in one place to give absolutely stellar performances. Over 4 days, the likes of Santana, Creedence Clearwater Revival, Janis Joplin, The Who, Jefferson Airplane, Joe Cocker, and Crosby, Stills, Nash & Young graced the stage. As the sun rose on day 4, the festival came to a close with sets by Paul Butterfield Blues Band, Sha Na Na, and of course, Jimi Hendrix. Hendrix had assembled a whole new band for the show, and the ensemble put on one of the most celebrated performances in rock history. But if we had to pick one moment that really summed up the energy of the set and the festival as a whole, it would have to be the Hendrix's impromptu rendition of The Star-Spangled Banner. The 4-minute, feedback-driven solo performance likely mesmerized the rest of the band as much as it did the crowd, and Hendrix used the end to seamlessly transition into Purple Haze. He closed out the Titanic performance with Hey Joe, ending the festival on the highest note possible. It seemed like the start of a new era for Hendrix, but he sadly died the following year.
Hi, got a tape I want to play.
Stop Making Sense might be the greatest concert film ever made. But if you ask Talking Heads drummer Chris Frantz, it wasn't exactly meant to be that way. Speaking with Rolling Stone in 2014, Frantz said that while the band were preparing to tour their 1983 record Speaking in Tongues, they thought it would be a good idea to get some of the shows on film. It just so happened that director Jonathan Demme and his girlfriend, Sandy McLeod, showed up to one of the early shows. He told the band he wanted to make a movie out of their live show, and so they began bringing Stop Making Sense to life. The then four-piece band brought out a bunch of additional players to back them up and put together a set made for the big screen. Then, with McLeod's help, they figured out all the choreography and camera placement. All they had to do after that was go broke. As France recalled, "Yes, we got a loan from Warner Brothers, but it was against our royalties. We were basically putting our life savings into this movie, which we did, and I'm glad we did, because not only did we get it back, but we have a great movie." That was definitely a worthwhile investment, as Stop Making Sense is still packing houses and being blared in college dorm rooms to this day. It received an IMAX re-release in 2023, and it remains a superbly crafted document of an all-time great band at their peak. At the 1988 VMAs, the band of the hour was supposed to be Australia's In Excess, and on paper they were. At least they walked away with the most awards that night. The issue is that their performance at the ceremony fell a bit flat. It's not that they did anything wrong. Anyone watching probably say they were perfectly solid. The issue is that In Excess had the misfortune of following Guns N' Roses, and Axl Rose and the boys had no intention of taking prisoners that evening. The band's debut LP, Appetite for Destruction, had been released the year before, but it was just beginning to snowball in popularity. The success the release had seen so far was largely thanks to MTV, which had recently started broadcasting the Welcome to the Jungle video fairly often. Fittingly, they played Jungle at the VMAs, and it was nothing short of a performance for the ages. Guns N' Roses were at the absolute peak of their powers at the time, and no one else who performed that night had any hope of matching their energy. They won Best New Artist that year, but that was nothing compared to the new legion of fans the broadcast helped them win over. Appetite for Destruction's sales skyrocketed, and it would go on to sell over 30 million copies. Before 1979, Illinois power pop outfit Cheap Trick had a decent-sized following and were certainly selling LPs, but they hadn't quite put out a hit single yet. But in April 1978, a 6-night stand in Japan became the unlikely launching pad the band needed to get over the hump back in the US. It turned out that Cheap Trick had a pretty enthusiastic Japanese following, so they decided to shoot the 2 performances at Tokyo's Budokan Stadium for Japanese television and make live recordings of the sets. This turned out to be a great call. The live LP, Cheap Trick at Budokan, was originally meant to only come out in Japan, but a 7-song sampler sent to radio DJs in North America got very popular very quickly. In February 1979, the LP was released stateside, and it went triple platinum and spawned the number 7 single, I Want You to Want Me.
I want you to want me.
In short, this was far and away their most successful release up to that point. Their next LP, Dream Police, came out later that year and went platinum. It also produced another top 40 single in the form of its title track. In short, At Budokan proved to be the break Cheap Trick needed, and it set a new standard for live rock records in the process.